Anonymous freedom. In a video a few days ago, I talked about anonymous freedom, whereas I could have social credits attached to my ability to be anonymous. The higher my social credit, the more I can be anonymous, because a high social credit means I'm a good person that can be trusted. And the lower my social score gives me less anonymity, meaning less privacy, all my transactions, everything I do in life is more transparent to everyone because I have a low social score and I have less trust. So, I went and I talked about the whole entire system and how it would work. But then I thought some more about, there should be a much fairer way to do things, because having a high social score and anonymity, there's a way to gamify that. I haven't thought through how, but anywhere there's anything where there's an advantage for someone else to have, which anonymity is an advantage, there will be a way to gamify it, right? And introduce corruption to it. So I thought of what could be a system whereas there isn't any gamification possible. And I would always go back to what I imagine heaven could be like. What would encourage the most good for people, especially people in large groups, large populations of people. And, when being true is the best feature of anything, truth. And true equals transparent. So I thought of there's a city being built by Akon called Akon City, which is a blockchain city. And I thought, well, if I were building a blockchain city, I would have it, in order to eliminate gamification and make things more true, it would be a good idea to have every transaction be transparent. Every financial transactions, by government, by corporations, by individuals, and have it be transparent and accessible by anyone, any in the city, right? So by doing this, it would introduce a way of tracking things, and by doing the tracking, an AI or a software could assign values to make things fair. So it would be kind of like a technological socialism. It would be unavoidable because, for instance, so let's say it's a country, or a really big, more than a city, right? So I enter this blockchain city, and my first purchase, because I arrive in the morning, is a cup of coffee. Now, let's assume that the coffee bean, the cup, everything that this cup of coffee, all of it was produced by that city or country or place, that blockchain place, meaning that the coffee bean has transparent digital information attached to it. The materials for the cup have transparent digital information attached to it. So from the point of the source, from the coffee bean comes out of the ground, the machine or person that is responsible for pulling that out of the ground is being paid, or there's a cost attached to it. And that cost is attached to the coffee bean coming out. The transportation, the processing, the whole entire thing, every element, everything that has to do with that cup of coffee is tracked transparently and leads back to me purchasing it. So every cent that I spend on that coffee can be tracked and say, okay, the person who served it to me, well, most likely it would be a machine, because the more you can eliminate human beings is the more efficient, right? So, but anywhere there's a human being involved, let's say if I spend $1 for the coffee, 0.001 cent can be tracked to this, that goes to this human being for him or her doing something, let's say whatever it is that they do, let's say they drove the coffee from one place to the next and they were paid to do that, then me spending $1 on that coffee, zero point zero 0.01 cent can be tracked to say, okay, this 0.01 cent goes to this person for driving that coffee bean from one place to the next, right? So this means that everything I spend can be tracked to see where does the money go. And by doing this, the AI can assign fair value, right? So it wouldn't be that there's a guy in the middle somewhere, let's say a middleman, who didn't do much work. Let's just say he made a connection, or he made a, currently right now, there could be, when I buy a cup of coffee, there could be someone in that transaction who is getting an unfair amount, unfair advantage, whereas they didn't do anything. Right? They just made a phone call, or they didn't even make a phone call. They're just a name in the middle that gets a cut of that purchase. And that's an unfair advantage, because that person is sitting on a yacht somewhere getting a cut of me spending the money on the coffee, which is the traditional capitalism, right? But in a city or in a land or in a place where everything is tracked and transparent, there wouldn't be any unfair advantage for anyone. And in fact, the more machines are involved would take away the advantage of human beings to abuse, to financially abuse others, right? So in a system whereas everything is tracked, now you have and this is transparent. So the dollar I spend, I can go to a screen, for instance, and tap on the screen of the dollar I spent and see the tree and see all the different ways the money gets distributed in an instant. From the point over the coffee bean all the way to my purchase, I can see all the money going in all directions, and I can see it's like a tree view, of everything. And this applies to every transaction in this place, city. Everything is transparent, right? There is no possibility of anonymous transactions. And because of that, there is no unfair advantage for anyone, because the AI will always assign a fair advantage, right? So the person, and in fact, physical work is worth more than machine work, right? So if I say, well, I want to make a coffee that I plant the beans, I pull it out of the ground myself, right? And basically, me as a human being, I'm going to do the most work as a human being to get that coffee. And of course, I can charge more for that because it's being tracked on blockchain to say that, well, this coffee was sourced from the ground by a human being who did human work and, was made. Basically, the more and more the human touch or the human activity I can attach to a cup of coffee, of course, increases the quality of the coffee as far as the spiritual quality of it. And even maybe the taste, because anything where you have less machine and more human is higher quality, right? So being that it's higher quality, and I can verify that it's higher quality by looking at the blockchain to say that, well, this bean, I can compare the two. I can have a bean that is sourced and created and managed completely by a machine. The machine pulls it out of the ground. The machine does everything as far as drying the bean. Just everything can be done by machine, all the way up to when I get the cup out of a machine, I put the cup under a machine and the coffee pours out. And over here you have a coffee, whereas there's a person involved. The person pulls it out of the ground. The person drives it to the place. The person dries it. The person pours the coffee out into my cup. And as long as there's a human being there doing all of that, then I have the choice to pay $1 for this coffee or $3 for this coffee. And I'm going to choose this coffee because there's more human beings involved and it's tracked and transparent. I can see for sure. I'm not being told a story. The story is true because it's all on blockchain, right? And this applies to every transaction, especially when you have talking about government. Now, the government in a place like this would be totally different, right? There would be less need for lawyers, accountants, because the machine and everything is transparent, is doing all the work, right? If my tax dollars, for instance, if I'm paying tax, if that's going to be needed, because it might not be needed, I may not even need to pay tax because you could say that, well, every transaction, there could be a small tax attached to every transaction. That tax goes to to run the government, which is the system that runs everything, right? And I can see every penny that's going on. I can see who's getting what and why they're getting it. This would be such an efficient system that there's a whole lot of bureaucracy, a whole lot of systems that wouldn't need to be there anymore. There wouldn't need to be financial court, and like you would really have such an efficient way of running things and such a transparent, fair way of doing things. I think it's like the heavenly version of life, right? Like to live in a place like that. Whereas I have the choice. I have given me more choices, Now, I don't think it would be possible for anyone to be poor or, homeless or anything like that. I mean, if someone has a mental problem, that would get dealt with. Even if I'm, let's say, a drug addict, right? I'm addicted to a certain type of drug and I'm buying that drug. That's legal. That's transparent. And then because I'm doing that, everyone, I wouldn't be able to, like, if I want to be addicted to a drug and do it at my house, at home, alone, or with friends, I can do that. And until I decide to get some help, So as far as the freedom to do things would still be available, the freedom to experiment, because drug use is like an experimentation. You can also call it an addiction, and there may be benefits to that. There are artists who take drugs and come up with great art. So the choice to do that would still be there, but it wouldn't be in a sense where it's going to affect society in a negative way. It would only affect the individual who's doing it in a negative way, because everything is transparent. When I buy the drugs, as far as the transaction goes, it's not illegal, and I'll be able to see from the source. So for instance, if I want to make sure that the drugs I'm getting is sourced in the place where I'm getting it from, I can do that, right? And in fact, I wouldn't be able to get it if it's not sourced in the place where I'm getting it from. That's another advantage to having a fully transparent system. Whereas it could be said that there's nothing in the system that can be sold that doesn't come from the system. There has to be a really, 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 really good reason. Like, the thing has to be impossible. So if I want a certain food from another land, it's not possible to get that type of fish. Let's say there's a type of fish that I want that's not available, anywhere around where that place is, right? So it's either that the fish is not available, like you can't get it because it's not from there, or if it's from somewhere else, then as much information, like that place has to provide a much digital information of the source of it. This is now where you can get social credit. You can even add in social credit. So if I'm going to buy something from somewhere else and it's possible that wherever I'm getting that thing from, there's abuses involved or there's an unfair advantage to the person who's providing that thing, right? For me, getting something like that, my social score could go down, right? So it encourages me to partake in transactions that are most transparent. The less transparent a transaction is, it affects my social score, because now I'm partaking in doing things or paying for things that may have an unfair advantage beyond the point of where it's being tracked, right? So that's the flow. I started thinking about this idea, and I really like it, man. I really like it. I think and at the highest levels, as far as the 1% goes, there wouldn't be a 1% in a situation like this. So it's like a digital socialism, but it's fair. It's digital fair socialism, because you're leaving all the distribution of social wealth or social to the machine. And it's not only all the distribution, but it's also all transparent and programmable, right? So if there's some, let's say there's a problem arises in a certain section of the city, right? A problem arises, something that wasn't planned, that was unexpected. Let's say some kind of health issue breaks out in a certain section of the city. A virus breaks out in a certain section of the city. Then the AI can automatically allocate resources to that section to deal with that for the period of time to deal with that until the problem is solved. And it wouldn't be up to any human being to make any decisions. It would just be, it'll just be automatic, automatic based on what's going on. So, yeah, man, I think it would be a great way for, a system like this, the more and more you have machines do things, is the less is the more and more freedom human beings can have to have children, and raise them in a nice place and do the things that machines can't do. So the things that machines can't do is like emotional stuff, like love, joy, everything that a human being does that machines don't do. So human machines shouldn't be managing finance, right? They should be doing art. They should be doing, having fun, partaking in education, sports, exploration, coming up with new ideas. So everything that like a machine could do, a machine should do. And everything that has to do with finance should be left, and social distribution and management of social values should be transparent and handled by AI. What happens to crime in a place where everything is transparent and being true is encouraged? So I think crime that has a link to financial stress, right? Or financial crimes that are done to get more money, theft, whatever crime, murder, it doesn't matter what the crime is. I would think there's two types of crime. There's financial crime that leads back to money, and emotional crime, crime that leads back to having emotional distress, And I think, for instance, a common one would be to say, like, if a man walked in on his woman with another man and gets overwhelmingly emotional and commits a crime as a result. This wouldn't be a crime that has to do with money, but it is a crime that has to do with being honest, right? So would it be possible for this woman to cheat on her man without him getting surprised by it? I think in a place where everything is honesty is encouraged and everything is being tracked, I would be able to know that there's something up with my woman before she gets away with it, right? And me being suspicious would lead to a conversation, and then we would be honest to each other to the point where we would resolve the situation or decide to separate before she's able to actually go cheat, right? Now, the cheating thing could also be spontaneous. Like she could run into a guy, and within 2 minutes, she's overwhelmed or he's overwhelmed with passion, and then it just happens. So, there's all kinds of different ways these things can happen. But the less and less crime there is, of course, leads to happier people. And of course, financial fairness in a society would definitely lead to less crime. More transparency. The more transparency there is as far as with finance would definitely eliminate, I think 90% of crime would be eliminated. Crime would be, I don't see why there would be crime, right? So, because I was thinking about, a blockchain city government, what would be the need for the government? Once you have the AI doing all the financial fairness, that is all transparent, that cuts out a lot of government oversight, right? A lot of government bureaucracy. 90% of it. It's just, when I try to imagine what kind of, even for corporations, corporate, as far as the overhead that a corporation has to run the corporation, financial transparency eliminates a lot of that. In fact, even the idea of a corporate entity would change. I don't even think it would be needed, right? Because I go back to like my example of a cup of coffee, right? And I think about stuff like, wow, so this means that I could buy a seed from the store, right? And my purchase of that seed from the store, there's a money attached to that. I can look at the tree of that and see it distributed all over. So I plant that seed in my backyard garden, right? And so I can get a vegetable from that seed, right? And I take this and I eat that vegetable, but I take the seed that I grew myself, and I take that seed and I replant that seed. So now I'm planting a seed that the origin of it is so far back, as far as when I purchased the original seed, that there has to be like a cutoff, because you're not gonna track that. It doesn't make sense to even track a seed that is planted, grown. I take another seed and I plant that. So now I have a seed that I planted that has no digital information attached to it, and I can plant that seed. And I can even tell the blockchain that I'm planting this seed that came from a seed that I planted that grew a plant before. And then the blockchain knows when that plant comes out of the ground, and then I can eat that. And that's what you call that a pure transaction, right? And I could say that by having a pure transaction attached to me, right, that anyone can go and see and watch a video of me planting the seed. Of course, it's not going to be a long video. Watch the video of me planting the seed, me taking the plant, and then eating that increases my social score. Anything that I can and track that I'm doing as a human being that enhances my life. But for instance, let's say I have a baby, right? And then now you can buy disposable diapers for your baby, but they also have diapers where they're non-disposable. You can reuse them. You wash them and reuse them, right? So let's say I have a baby and I have diapers for that baby. And I remember how it used to be when there wasn't any disposable diapers. So I have the choice of buying disposable diapers, right? Whereas, of course, there's a whole bunch of money attached to that, as far as the creation of the disposable diaper, and then the recycling of it, if it doesn't get recycled, when I throw it out. So there's a money attached to me, to the creation of it and the destruction of it. But if I have a cloth diaper, right, that I buy the cloth diaper and then I use it on the baby, and then I change the diaper and then I hand wash it, right? Or I could use a machine to wash it, but the machine has electricity, and that electricity, the paying for the electricity is goes. So the whole point is, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to enhance my social score by doing things, doing things that are more efficient and more fair. So by me using a cloth diaper that I hand wash, and anyone can go on the blockchain and watch me hand washing the diaper that I reuse, reduces my, my impact on on the environment, and that increases my social score. So human beings would be in a position to be more self-aware about how they do things. And by me being more self-aware, or me trying to do things to eliminate cost in my life, increases my social score. Now, what is social score good for? I don't know. I haven't thought about that far. But of course, having a good social score there has to be benefits for it. But I can't think of any benefits, because in a system where everything is so tracked, hey, you know what? Social score could be money, right? Let's put it like that, right? So now because I was able to change 100 diapers, I get social credits. Then I can spend on disposable diapers if I choose, right? So in fact, I can say, okay, if I change diapers 10 times, right? If I change cloth diapers for a week, right? Then I earn enough social credits to buy disposable diapers that would last me a month. I like that. I like that, right?